Hello, all of my fellow bookworms, and welcome back to another video. It is that magical yet fleeting part of the year once again. It's the time of the year where I feel the most inspired and happy, and I do my best to make the most out of it by making cinnamon buns and celebrating Day of the Dead. But by far, my very favorite thing to do is curling up with a good, spooky, and atmospheric story. Now, I like to read horror year-round, but I do save the ones that I'm expecting to be favorites for the autumn and also a bit going into winter time, because that way I feel so much more absorbed in the story, and also it's just another way to celebrate the season. So let's get into my spooky season TBR. I will start first with the books that I am the most excited about, the ones that I absolutely refuse to end autumn without reading, and then I will go into some extras that I'm hoping to read if I have the time. And that's exactly where I would love to have your feedback, by the way, in case you've read any of these. So first up on the TBR is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I got inspired to read this one because I just finished rewatching the show that goes by the same name, and I hadn't actually realized that it's a book, and a very famous one at that. I don't know how I haven't read this one yet. Gothic horror is my favorite genre to read this time of year, so as you'll see, many of my top picks fit into that genre. If you don't know, Gothic horror is all about the atmosphere. The horror aspect, rather than coming from the plot, is more so about the ambience. The setting is what usually takes center stage here, which is often some old decrepit manor or a Gothic castle. These old manors act a lot more like a character than a setting in a traditional sense. They're heavily personified, and the horror aspect really revolves around them. These manors are grand and rich, yet at the same time they're decaying, beautiful yet unsettling, and they often serve to reflect the dark secrets and isolation of the people within their walls. Oftentimes, they are literally haunted house, so there are ghosts responsible, but it can also just be about that feeling of something being off, something being a bit uncanny. The claustrophobia, the dread, the is it just in my mind or is there something wrong with the house? And the way that the house seems to swallow its inhabitants. If you want to read a story that just feels eerie because they're often not super scary, and just has this rich, lush ambience, yet something is wrong. It's a genre that blends the spooky with the tragic, where characters are questioning their own insanity as much as they are the ghosts and things going around. They are so delicious to read in the autumn. They're so rich in atmosphere. And I'm so excited to read one of the most famous ones, sort of a modern classic in the genre. I'm also really curious to see how it differs from the TV show, because I've read that the source material was used in a very intentional but also very subtle way, with also a completely different cast of characters and completely different plots. So even if you have seen the show, I think that the book should still be a very fresh experience. Next up, keeping on the theme, I promise I'm not only reading Shirley Jackson books, this is the only other one, but I wanted to get to We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Also by Shirley Jackson, as I mentioned, and also definitely a modern Gothic horror classic. Both of these books are quite short, and of course, it depends on my enjoyment of the first one if I will go directly into the next one, but I often find that I get a lot more out of books in case I read from the same author back to back. You're kind of then already used to their style and their voice. Okay, breaking it up a little bit, the third one that I definitely want to get to is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I have been looking forward to this one for so long. I've heard such good things. Finally, I got to a few books by the author this year. I read Final Girls Support Group, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, and also How to Sell a Haunted House, and I loved all of them. I think Witchcraft for Wayward Girls was maybe the most fun and atmospheric, but How to Sell a Haunted House actually creeped me out a little bit. That one features a haunted house and specifically haunted puppets, which is one of my biggest childhood fears, so that one, if you're actually looking for a Grady Hendrix that will properly scare you, because I think that's usually not really the point of his books, read How to Sell a Haunted House, particularly if you're afraid of puppets. For me, I don't do puppets, I don't do clowns. I watched Stephen King's It and Chucky when I was way, way, way too young, but I digress. He's so good at making horror fun because he pays homage to all of these old classic quite campy horror films in the past, and I'm expecting him to do exactly the same thing with My Best Friend's Exorcism. I think it's going to be the one that I like the most. I'm sensing 80s kind of Stranger Things vibes, and it's going to be great. Next up is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This one is a Gothic horror set in Mexico, similar to Mexican Gothic, which was my favorite read of last year. But whereas Mexican Gothic took place in Mexico, but in a very isolated location with this English manor and this English family, that's where the horror part of it was set. This time is going to be a haunted hacienda, which is a classic Mexican ranch-styled house. These homes are often sprawling with these big central gardens and these thick walls on the outside. And the historic ones do indeed often have pretty dark pasts. So I think it's a great setting for a Gothic horror. I'm so excited to see like Mexican Gothic, but with more infusion of Mexico and Mexican culture. Pablo is from there, and I have such a deep love for Mexico. So combining that culture with Gothic horror, which is one of my favorite genres, is just the perfect combination for me, and I'm so excited to read that one. If you have other similar recommendations similar to Mexican Gothic, please let me know. I know that Isabel Cañas has some other books, and I think Silvia Moreno Garcia also came out with another one recently, so please let me know if you've read any other ones. And then there's The Spirit Bares Its Teeth, which came out a couple of years ago, and since its release, it's been massively on my radar. I'm so excited to read it. It is a Victorian fantasy horror that's set in London, and honestly, who doesn't love a creepy Victorian London setting? So I'm just going to go ahead and read you the blurb on this one because I don't think I will be able to do it proper justice otherwise. Mors vincit omnia, death conquers all. London, 1883. The veil between the living and the dead has thinned. Violet-eyed mediums commune with spirits under the watchful eye of the Royal Speaker Society, and 16-year-old Silas Bell would rather rip out his violet eyes than become an obedient speaker wife. According to his mother, he'll be married at the end of the year. It doesn't matter that he's needed a decade of tutors to hide his autism, that he practices surgery on slaughtered pigs, that he is a boy, not the girl the world insists on seeing. After a failed attempt to escape an arranged marriage, Silas is diagnosed with veil sickness, a mysterious disease sending violet-eyed women into madness, and shipped away to Braxton Sanatorium and Finishing School. The facility is cold, the instructors merciless, and the students either bloom into eligible wives or disappear. So when the ghosts of missing students start begging Silas for help, he decides to reach into Braxton's innards and expose its rotten guts to the world, as long as the school doesn't break him first. Doesn't that sound deliciously eerie? It does have body horror, which I'm quite sensitive to, but well, with that description and also the really nice reviews, it has a 4.46 average on Goodreads, which usually the horror genre people are quite harsh with. I am very intrigued and looking forward to read that. So there you have it. Those are my very, very top picks, the ones that I refuse to end the season without. But I still have a lot more that I want to get to, and those are the ones I would be very happy to have your help with as well. I'm just going to include here a little clip from my Notion page. I make one every season. Sometimes I slack off for the spring or summer ones, but always I make an autumn one, and it features some very cute little ghost art that I found on Pinterest. So obviously there are way too many books on here for me to realistically get through, but I like having the flexibility because I'm a huge mood reader, and I kind of have different tiers of these. So the ones that I am the most interested to get to afterwards, depending on the mood that I have Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which I haven't read any of her books, which I'm not a huge romance reader, but Bride sounds like kind of a fun time. I guess it's kind of like inspired off of Twilight, no? But from what I've heard, it's written in a very self-aware way, so I feel like it would be kind of funny and a nice time to enjoy. Then I have, I believe it's an anthology, Never Whistle at Night, which is based on Native American horror stories, I believe. If it's an anthology, I don't want to know too much before going in, but let me know if you recommend it. And then I have Ninth House. I love dark academia. I was really, really bummed that I didn't like Catabasis. If you're interested, I made a whole video on that. And I tried not to read too much about the plot for Ninth House, but it's my understanding that it's also more of a traditional dark academia with a secret society. There's something about going into hell. So in some ways it has a lot of things parallel to catabasis, but I think it's more up the alley that I was hoping for. Then we have The Woman in Black, also a big modern classic of horror. I haven't seen the film, so it would be a very fresh story for me. Next up is The Phantom of the Opera, which I do have a physical copy of, a super beautiful physical copy, one that I would probably prefer to read on my Kindle because I really don't want to mess this one up. I don't have so many beautiful ones, and oh, it's just gorgeous. I have a matching one for the picture of Dorian Gray, which is also a great autumn read if you haven't read it. What I'm not sure of actually is if it was originally a novel and then translated as a playwright, or if this is just the written playwright. I don't know. I need to check. But I am a huge Phantom of the Opera fan. I have loved the movie like my whole life. I've had a CD since I was very little, so I would be super dramatic and sing the songs. So I think I will quite enjoy that as well. And next is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. I love T. Kingfisher. It's also another one that can break things up in case one story ends up being maybe a little bit too dark. This is a Snow White retelling, but in every single one of her books, she just makes me laugh so much. So I know it'll be a good one if I want the ambiance, but also not to be too scared and to just have a good time. And then we have Rouge. I really loved Bunny, so I'm interested in reading more from her. I know that Bunny was really hit or miss with a lot of people, and I thought I hated it when I was first reading it, like the first few chapters, before I realized that the main character is supposed to be unlikable and that this is just a whole ridiculous situation. Yeah, maybe depends on the mood that you're in also when you go in reading it. But I had a lot of fun and I've heard really good things about Rouge. What Feasts at Night? This is the sequel to What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I also massively, massively loved that. And she wrote that being heavily inspired by Mexican Gothic. And naturally, I love that too. It's kind of like Mexican Gothic meets Fall of the House of Usher. Really good time. I actually started reading the sequel, but I wasn't quite in the mood. I think I tried that in the springtime, and it just wasn't the vibe at that moment. And then the last of the kind of priorities, unrealistic priorities, is Lost Gods by Brom. I loved Slewfoot, and I'm interested in reading more by the author. Slewfoot was properly dark. It's probably one of the darkest books that I've read, and I loved it. It has a crazy, unhinged ending. Yeah, really good if you want witchy vibes, but dark, very dark witchy vibes. I have this other column, if time allows. I'm not necessarily going to read these ones out loud because also I think it's not so realistic that I would get to them. But if you do see something on there that you liked a lot, do let me know if you think I should bump it higher on my priorities list. Then I have audiobook options, which heavily depends on my library, but I started listening to A Deadly Education, which is also kind of dark academia vibes. Actually, it's very similar to Harry Potter in a way, but the point of the actual school is that they're expecting dark things to come to them. So it kind of makes more sense in some ways because Hogwarts was really, really unsafe, but that unsafety is tied into the plot in this one. Not comparing to Harry Potter on the actual level of enjoyment. Nothing can touch Harry Potter, but yeah, it's still a very similar vibe. I thought about also listening to Our Hideous Progeny, but I'm worried that I will maybe like it too much and maybe that should be read physically because I'm a huge Frankenstein fan. Actually, yeah, I think I will change that afterwards and put that with the priorities. And then I have kind of just other thrillers because thrillers work really well for me on audio, like Sundown Motel or Listen for the Lie, maybe Home Before Dark, and possibly Bury Your Gaze. But depends a lot on my mood. I also sometimes listen to French podcasts and stuff when I'm walking around. So not sure if I will get to any of those. And then I have a section for palette cleansers because again, if I especially read something on the level with Brahms' book, then I maybe want something lighter to, for my mental health. So for more so cozy fall books, which are usually not super my thing, but in case I need it, I have Garden Spells, which is supposed to be witchy and a very whimsical, kind of practical magic way. The Keeper of Enchanted Rooms, which I don't really know anything about, but it's another one of these cozy autumnal books. Same thing with the X-Hex, which is a romance, The House Witch, or Shady Hollow. I think realistically the only one of those that I will definitely end up reading at some point is Garden Spells. But otherwise, these kind of Legends and Lattes type books, I realized that I really prefer having a lot higher stakes in a story. So there you have it. Those are all the books I have on my Autumn TBR. I'll admit that I was a little bit torn about going directly into spooky books or not because I just got from my library after super long waits Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang and Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I've been dying to get to those books for the longest time, but I think I've decided to just fully embrace spooky season and go for all of these autumnal books first. And then maybe when I'm on my honeymoon in Mexico, it's going to be super warm, so then I can maybe change the genre a little bit to fit the vibe. I'm especially excited to get to the Infernal Devices because Carrie Can Reads, in case you don't know her, she's another booktuber that's amazing. I love watching her videos. And she did so much work into making these super long plot summaries of the Mortal Instruments series. It takes place in the same world, the Shadowhunter universe, but it was published first, so a lot of people say that you should read those first, even though chronologically they take place later. It's really nice for people like me who want to dive into the Infernal Devices, but don't have so much interest in reading thousands of pages of a forbidden love plotline where the forbidden part is incest, because no thank you. I don't care if they end up not being related. No thank you. I would love to hear in the comments some of your all-time favorite autumn reads or books that you think that I should be getting to, as well as what's on your TBR for this season. Wishing you the best reads and see you next time.